welcome to the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and we have a big show lined up for you this evening. The Prime Minister had an address to the nation this afternoon at 4 p.m., just on the eve of Unlock 2.0. Remember, the guidelines for the next phase of Unlock were out last evening and extended about 31st of July, which has a little more relaxation. But the big message coming in from the Prime Minister was that we can't let our guard down. And this is very, very crucial as we go into the monsoon months, which come with their own spate of diseases and coughs and fevers, etc. We also talked about some people becoming a little careless and how local administrations have to be seized on implementing social distancing rules. But the biggest key takeaway from the Prime Minister's address today was the extension of a scheme which gives 5 kilos of food grain and 1 kilo of pulse free to every ration card holder. This will now be extended till the end of November. Take a look at the key highlights from what the Prime Minister said today.
भारत में भी स्थानीय प्रशासन को इसी चुस्ती से काम करना चाहिए। ये 130 करोड़ देशवासियों के जीवन की रक्षा करने का अभियान है। भारत में गांव का प्रधान हो या देश का प्रधानमंत्री, कोई भी नियमों से ऊपर नहीं है। त्योहारों का ये समय जरूरतें भी बढ़ाता है, खर्च भी बढ़ाता है। इन सभी बातों को ध्यान में रखते हुए ये फैसला लिया गया है कि प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण अन्न योजना का विस्तार अब दिवाली और छठ पूजा तक, यानी नवंबर महीने के आखिर तक कर दिया जाएगा। यानी 80 करोड़ लोगों को मुफ्त अनाज देने वाली ये योजना अब जुलाई, अगस्त, सितंबर, अक्टूबर, नवंबर में भी लागू रहेगी। सरकार द्वारा इन 5 महीनों के लिए 80 करोड़ से ज्यादा गरीब भाई बहनों को हर महीने परिवार के हर सदस्य को 5 किलो गेहूं या 5 किलो चावल मुफ्त मुहैया कराया जाएगा। और साथ ही प्रत्येक परिवार को हर महीने 1 किलो चना भी मुफ्त दिया जाएगा। अब पूरे भारत के लिए एक राशन कार्ड की व्यवस्था भी हो रही है, यानी एक राष्ट्र एक राशन कार्ड, वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड। इसका सबसे बड़ा लाभ उन गरीब साथियों को मिलेगा जो रोजगार या दूसरी आवश्यकताओं के लिए अपना गांव छोड़ करके कहीं और जाते हैं।
The big news last evening was the government of India banning 59 apps for a plethora of reasons, including violation of data privacy laws, security, etc. Now, the statement from the government and the Ministry of Information Technology did not specify any country or any other kind of reason for banning these apps, but even a cursory look at the list shows you that these are apps that are Chinese companies, that are run by Chinese companies. The biggest one of them is TikTok, a video short format sharing app which has become extremely popular across India in various sections of the society, which has millions of followers and downloads. And now the question is, what next? Where do we go from here? Now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has put out a statement saying that they're worried and they're looking into it. Of course, the Indian government on each side will hear representations from some of these apps. TikTok has said that it's going to talk to the government, etc. But it also has highlighted a very interesting and important ecosystem that has emerged because of apps like these. An ecosystem which has sprung a whole new generation of stars, which has led to amazing engagement that has made marketers, see mouth-watering results, and has also given now an opportunity for the Indian startup ecosystem to come in and grab that space. While it's no point really now speculating whether this will lead to larger moves on other kind of Chinese participation in the startup space, what we can say for sure that there are now millions of viewers and content creators literally up for grabs. So where do we go from here? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Nikhil Pava, founder of MediaNama.com, and someone who follows the policy of this space very, very closely. Excited to speak with him. Burgess Malu is joining me, who's the head public policy for ShareChat, another video format app who could be the next TikTok and is definitely hoping to be the next TikTok. Rehan Yar Khan, managing partner of Orias Ventures, joins me on the show this evening, as does Paras Tomar, an actor, influencer, and someone who till this morning had a large number of followers on an app that is no longer available in India. So Paras, let me begin with you. And your take of what has happened since yesterday and how it impacts you. What is the kind of presence you had on TikTok? We were speaking earlier and you said because of the following that you found there, you actually spun off and started a company.
So TikTok was a very interesting business story. I mean, as a former journalist, as an actor, for me, social media is a part of our lives. Social media is an extension for us. What happened was on TikTok, I became hugely popular because I started doing a lot of videos which are DIY videos. I started something called Paras Ki Nuske. So my fan base is about 3.3 million people. Now, when we put the maths together, we realized even if 1% of these people are buying my products, we launched Nuske by Paras. So I became India's first influencer to launch his own product line. Now, that actually came in simply because of the commerce that was coming from TikTok. Now, the user base is so big. So for somebody like me, when you hear the news about the fact that TikTok is growing, for somebody like me who's an actor and a businessman, I think it's not our only revenue stream. But because we started a business which was based a lot on the sales that we were getting from TikTok, it is definitely a hit. For example, if I put up a video on TikTok about one of my Nuske by Paras products, we instantly see a sales jump, which is about 22%. We employ about 25 people because of TikTok, because, sales are so big. So for us, we took that short video platform, turned it into something else.
So where are you going to move now, Paras? Where are you and your followers in that whole model going to move?
So we are actually not moving because the one thing a lot of people feel is the fact that there is nothing like fidelity when it comes to creators. I was always on Instagram, I was on Facebook, I was on YouTube, I was on TikTok. Since last night, I've got 12,000 more followers on Instagram who probably migrated from TikTok. Now, of course, the thing is when you compare millions to a few lakhs, that is a huge discrepancy. But I'm very curious to see how many of these followers come on board, buy products. But the Indian company, which is ZTV, is also launching their own app. So I think for a lot of us, the migration will be there. Having said that, I feel like even with TikTok, because we've been there, done that, we've seen TikTok go off the Play Store in the past, but they've come back. And this privacy concern, if it's addresses that, and if they feel that there is a problem, if it doesn't come back, then maybe we'll go to that.
Is it just a privacy concern? Now, this is an important question, Nikhil, and I just want to get your view on this and what really is going on. There seems to be one point of view that, hey, these apps were actually flouting a lot of norms. But in that case, why action on them only yesterday?
If you look at it, the press release from the Indian government that says that the order was issued under Section 69A of the IT Act. And under the rules of Section 69A, it says that the government these orders are confidential. They don't need to disclose them. The fact that they've chosen to disclose the fact that they've issued this order and that they've listed the apps and all of those apps are Chinese means that the Indian government wanted people to know that these apps are being banned, right? So this was clearly a political decision that was taken to disclose. I don't recall the government having issued a press release under Section 69A for as long as this law has been there, There have been some disclosures every now and then about number of sites or number of links that are being banned, but we've never seen them actually promoted in a press release. So they wanted to give a signal, and what's also important is that this is coming, I think, 4 days after there was some reports citing government sources saying that there's been an increase in attack on Indian sites and Indian institutions from Chinese hackers. So perhaps this is the government's way of retaliating. From a privacy concern perspective, frankly, these concerns have been raised even in Parliament as of last year. The Swadeshi Jagran Manch and has run campaigns against TikTok for over a year. So the question is, why now? Why this situation? And it's very clear that they want to send a message.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, privacy concerns are there. And if they're valid ones, then definitely they should be addressed. If we need to send a message, then we should be able to do that as well. The question is now, where do we go from here? Burgess Malu, are you hoping that ShareChat grabs some of, that talent that TikTok has unleashed? And, one thing we will have to really admit that a platform like TikTok has managed to open up this performance avenue for so many people who may not have had that opportunity before. Everyone with that smartphone in their hand is a star.
Thanks, Tamanna. Look, I think we've been doing this far before TikTok came to India. ShareChat has been operating in India for the last 4 years long, 4 years plus, in fact. And we have seen creators create content, and become very, very successful at that, especially from, tier 2 and tier 3 parts of the country. So it's not something new to us. We've been doing this long before TikTok came, and we'll be doing this long after TikTok has left the country. That said, I think it's not just, privacy concerns. There have been concerns about where our data is going. There have been concerns that have been raised multiple times by various organizations, newspaper leaks, et cetera, about not just privacy, but, security concerns with these apps. The fact that these apps were, capturing data from your devices, far more data than many other apps, capture, including, you may not like the other platforms, the American platforms, but they are far more careful of what data they are capturing from your device and all of that. So this was something that was definitely long time coming. And I think we as a platform will welcome all the creators who want to, join us. And I think in the weeks going forward, you're going to see a lot more action that will crop up from Indian platforms. Like Paras just mentioned, there are other folks who are launching new platforms in the country.
Yes.
And the fact that now you have an ecosystem in India which is widely open. It's not being, run or managed by one company that is funded and heavily funded by the Chinese government, possibly.
But it was that
and you have a level playing
Mr.
field.
Malu, I must ask you here. You said that you've been around before TikTok. There are others who have also been around. Why has this one platform gained currency to this?
Exactly, and that's what I'm coming to. Right?
Is there something we need to learn in terms of the tech? And why it has been an easy format and interface for people to use?
No, more than anything else, right? I think before this, we were discussing the fact that, some of these Chinese platforms have been flooding the Indian ecosystem with a lot of capital. It's any wonder where this capital is coming from. But the fact that they've been flooding the system with so much capital is why they've been able to acquire users far, easier and far faster. And I can see Paras nodding. The fact that even other platforms, even American platforms, have not grown so quickly anywhere else in the world or in India because of the fact that there's been so much capital flooding the ecosystem. And the fact that many of the creators, they've tied up these creators with exclusivity contracts and, paid them large sums of money. But as a result, led to other platforms not being able to actually, just continue.
But no one has stopped anyone from paying them large sums of money. You can go ahead and pay content creators large sums of money.
Look. There's a difference between being a platform that is run on pure equity and platforms that are probably being funded by the government of China, right? There's a reason why national security is being brought in here. You don't see national security being brought in for other platforms that operate in this country. So there is clearly a reason why state-funded platforms are being stopped from operating in India. This is very much like the airline wars where the US airlines are fighting with the Middle Eastern airlines.
But airlines is a different ballgame.
No, but it's similar. You're pushing so much capital into the ecosystem. Where this capital is coming from is clearly no one is surprised, especially considering the country it's coming from. And you're tying up all the creators. You don't see YouTube or other platforms tying up creators and saying don't work with other platforms. You're seeing that happen with TikTok and with other Chinese platforms. So there's a reason why these creators are being captured.
Perspective in, and that's an interesting perspective. It's a sort of predatory tool.
And by the way, we have raised this concern with the government. We raised this concern last year that there was this kind of predatory behavior being done by these platforms.
Yeah, but predatory behavior is a different question and concern. Privacy breach is a different question and concern. National security is a third one, and it all ties up to one country from where it's coming. So we're going to have to look at the entire perspective and why this action has been triggered and where does it go from here. Rehan Yar Khan, how do you look at this? Do you look at this as a shot in the arm for Indian startups as it's being, touted? Because the fact is that there are other giants in this space that are not Indian companies and are not Chinese companies and are well enmeshed and probably as capital rich as any of these apps as well. So there's nothing to say that all of those users will not just migrate to another platform.
Yeah, well, I think it's very interesting. So on the show here, you have two Indians. You have Paras, who's not so happy about TikTok being banned, and then you have Burgess, who's absolutely ecstatic about it. So I think two very diverse views over here. I think sure, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity that they are at a disadvantage, and there is a window of opportunity that the Indian platforms can make use of. We're not sure how long this window of opportunity will last. It's been done under the umbrella of saying that there's something wrong with the app. I'm sure there are lobby groups and all kinds of people already at work trying to find out what that is. Maybe there are people filing high court orders and all kinds of things are happening. So we're not sure how long this window will last. Sure, the Indian platforms can take advantage of it. But also, I think, we live in a very democratic world today in terms of pure merit, right? I think I have used TikTok. I think it's absolutely fantastic in terms of their innovation and what they've developed, of the whole format, right, and marrying it with music. So there's something to be said about that. UC browser had, side loading, so there's something to be said about that. So while I hope the Indian platforms do take advantage of it, I certainly think in the long run, there's one thing and one thing only which wins, which is innovation. And they must utilize this window of opportunity to up their innovation, up their user base, and then keep going. Because if not the Chinese, somebody else will move in, the Eastern Europeans, the Americans, it's an open world today.
Okay, Nikhil, I want to understand the aspect of data privacy a little more. So the prime concern, or one of the prime concerns, seems to be that apps like TikTok, and not just TikTok, there are 59 in that whole list, are taking data of their users and storing them in China. Essentially not storing them in India. Now, that's a long-standing concern that the Indian government has had way before this LAC incident, and it extends to many of the tech majors across the country. It is, in fact, the subject of trade negotiations between India and the US. Will there now be pressure to act similarly on other companies that are storing data of Indians and not necessarily in India? WhatsApp is under a lot of pressure for a long time to sort of break its encryption when required.
So I think those concerns are real. Look, even in its filing at the open-ended working group in the UN, the Indian government has said that the sovereignty of a country needs to extend to data as well. And there is concern about data, even if data is, and as far as the previous statements go, TikTok stores its data on Indian servers, and I think Burgess can correct me if I'm wrong here. But,
You're wrong.
I'm wrong? Okay. So look, even if the data is going to China, in an interconnected world, data is going to be stored all across the globe. The real point of concern is that there are laws in China that mandate that if companies can be required to assist the state in actions if in the interest of national security, etc. So these apps can be used for, let's say, manipulation of perspectives. One example is that back in 2017 or 18 during the Doklam standoff, there was a concern on the grapevine that UC News was downplaying Indian concerns, and it was highlighting the Chinese point of view. Now, in a war-like situation or in a face-off like India and China have, there is manipulation of perspectives which is clearly possible. Information warfare has been huge over the last few years. The IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad has also raised these concerns regarding WhatsApp being used for information, for misinformation, right? So these are real concerns, and I think in this situation, the government has to do what it needs to do to ensure that the Indian population isn't misled, that there isn't, that China doesn't effectively run an information war over these apps and platforms. But just as this could be done over TikTok, it could be done over WhatsApp, it could be done even probably over ShareChat or over Facebook. So the information operations can happen on multiple platforms, and it's quite difficult to spot them. So in that sense, in this situation, I think it's difficult to argue against the government action. What we need to be careful going forward also is regarding, hardware and that may be deployed on our telecom networks.
Yeah.
And Trump's pushback against Huawei is a signal to take into account. The other thing to keep in mind is that but Tamanna, we have to remain in an interdependent, interconnected world, because no single country can build all the technology and all the software and all the apps by themselves. So there has to be actions taken on a conscious basis for a limited time period, and enough needs to be done to ensure that national security is protected. That doesn't mean that we disconnect from the internet or we get a balkanized internet.
So I get your point, but there's no indication so far that we want to in any way go the China route where, there's no Google, there's no Facebook, there's no maps, and they only use Weibo and, their own stuff. So there's no indication that we want to go down that route at all.
But the Indian bureaucracy has been fascinated with China's firewall and the way they control the narrative. We keep hearing this every now and then. There are people who are against it, but at least from the BJP folks, we keep hearing about this. So I don't think that fear is also real.
Let's talk about what we have visibility on. Let's talk about what we have visibility on. And today we have visibility of action with very clear reasons being given. And of course, a whole process will go through of these apps and these companies possibly giving their side of the story, etc., whether something will come of it or not. The point is, Burgess Malu, then how can your Indian startups actually compete, and why have they not been able to so far in this space? Look at your top downloaded apps, and if they're not Chinese, they're American. There are very few, Indian apps. I think I was looking at a list of top 10, and Hotstar was the only one which made it in that list of top 10. So what is the inherent problem that we are facing, and which we need to now truly introspect and address? Because, most users, and maybe Paras will bear this out, I will ask him next, are not loyalists to any app. They're going to go where the followers are and where it's in and where the buzz is. They don't really care what the nationality of that app is beyond the point.
Right. I think that's a little unfair to say, though, that you're not seeing Indian apps in the top 10. In fact, till 2 years back, a lot of the apps in the top 10 section were actually Indian. In the last 2 years, you've seen an invasion of India's digital space by Chinese platforms and Chinese companies.
What
and
about
after
Chinese funding, Burgess? There's been a significant amount of Chinese funding as well, right?
And Chinese funding, but Chinise funding still leads to Indian apps, right? It's not, those are Indian apps. So if you talk of Hotstar is still considered an Indian app. It's owned by Walt Disney, Nikhil. So if you want to get your facts right, at least please get them right before you comment.
No.
Anyways, besides that, let's not jump.
Yeah.
No, but
stop
I'm saying it's fine for Burgess to say this, but ShareChat has also raised Chinese funding. Flipkart is no longer an Indian app; it's owned by Walmart.
I'll come to the Chinese aspect and funding aspect of it. My question is very simple.
I'm not being selective with my facts, Burgess. That's all.
No, my question is very simple, and it is to Burgess, and I want Burgess to answer. My question is simply this: so we are saying that this is an opportunity for homegrown tech professionals and startups and companies to shine and grab that sort of attention. My question is, we need to introspect and see why we haven't been able to do it so far. Are we able to compete on the same level? Are we lacking in any department or in any sphere?
I think we are definitely able to compete. We have been competing. You have seen a lot of Indian startups that are doing very well today, with or without Chinese funding. The fact is that you see a lot of companies doing very well. They have grown. Some of them have been acquired by foreign entities. It's not the case that Indian startups have not been able to grow in this country. The only problem has been that in the last 2 years, you've seen overtly, you've seen startups or companies coming in from China that are heavily funded and that have been vitiating the atmosphere, the cyber atmosphere in the country. Minus that, it's not the case that you have not seen Oyo Rooms or you have not seen, Make My Trip, Paytm, PhonePe, Flipkart, and the list goes on, right? Which have all become either unicorns or have gone even into tens of billions of dollars. The fact is that in the last 2 years, you've seen the market getting warped simply because there's been an excess of capital coming in, and I think that ecosystem has now been changed. You're now going to see a level playing field, and I think you will see more startups in India growing. And the fact that there are already consumers, there's a market ready, would only mean
so
that.
You're saying the only difference is the money. The only difference is the funding.
It's the capital funding, right? You're seeing.
Okay. So it's the only difference is the funding. I want to ask Rehan Yarkhan. You wanted to come in, Rehan, but I also want to ask you about this distinction that's being made about Chinese apps and startups which have Chinese funding in them. And a lot of those startups don't have only Chinese funding. They have a whole range of funds coming in from China as well. But it's a huge talk point today. And I want to understand your view on this distinction. Question is for Rehan Yarkhan.
So I think, my view on why the Chinese apps are currently ahead of the Indian apps is I think it's a matter of market, right? So what happened was that in China, the market arrived fairly early. And because the market arrived fairly early, there was a lot of development of these kind of apps, whereas the market arrived a little later in India. So it's taking a little time for the app creators here to catch up. And come to that level of sophistication and innovation that is currently there. So you're probably about 3-4 years behind the Chinese market in terms of cycle and product creation, and I think that is something that will narrow in the next 2 to 3 years, right? You were listing a whole lot of Indian apps earlier, right? And what we've seen in other fields is that you normally started off with foreign incumbents, and other than in Amazon, the Indian apps then came and won the game, right? So there used to be Expedia, if you remember back in the day. There was Travelocity, right? There used to be Monster, but then Naukri won that game, and Make My Trip won that game, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a question of market, right? In terms of funding, India is an attractive market in terms of the connectivity. So it will attract a lot of funding from all over the world, and rightly so. FDI from China, FDI from the US, FDI from all over the world. And I think that kind of funding, in my opinion, at least, should be permitted, because it's not controlled funding. If you want to grow the Indian ecosystem, you must allow money from all over the world. Because what will happen today is that, let's say you cut off funding from a particular region, it's not like you don't have competition from the US or from Europe. There could be apps which are receiving, funding in those areas, which will then come and compete with you over here. So I think two very separate issues. You may have to stop Chinese apps, but I don't know if you should stop their funding.
No, and at the end of the day, it's all about the users. Some of the most creative videos about the banning of these apps very quickly were being put out on TikTok itself. Paras, I want to get your point of view on the users. Will they all scatter? Are they happy to move on to the next big thing? Because I think that whoever has the first mover advantage in the next I think, week or so is the one who's going to gain that market share.
So-
all of those people who want to put out their videos and don't know where to go.
So one of the things which I think a lot of people don't necessarily factor in is the fact that what becomes the next big thing is where the biggest creators go. One of the things that, when you're saying that there is a lot of Chinese funding that came to TikTok, I think that was one of the instrumental reasons why they handpicked a lot of talent. We would be paid a lot of money to be on that platform, as we are being paid money by some of the now Indian startups who are trying to make sure that we get on that platform. Now, because we had that loyalty, what I think TikTok in this case did very well was the fact that there was a massive incentive for us to be on these platforms. The other thing about this is that even if I said I want to be on an Indian platform today, there was literally nothing else. Now the Z thing is coming.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Paras. I can't hear you. Can I just ask you to speak a little slower and louder?
Should I repeat that again or what?
Yes, please, if you can.
So one of the biggest things that I think people forget to factor is in the fact that whatever is going to become big next, it'll be because the biggest creators are going there. Today, I think last year, if I'm not wrong, in the American scenario, at least the ad revenue that came in was actually higher for the first time from television than from social media and from digital platforms. That revenue system is also coming here. Today, when the lockdown is happening, brands can't spend money on advertising because ads are not being shot. Influencer marketing has become that big. Why do influencers want to be on TikTok? Because they generated the most amount of views, which meant that brands wanted to come to us. So today, it's not about us wanting to shift to another platform. The reason TikTok got it absolutely head on, whether or not they got funding, was the fact that they really understood the Indian market. People initially with these team who were using Google Translate to understand every single festival, every single Indian idea, word. I remember they wanted to know the lyrics of Hindi songs. They really did their culture studies absolutely right. I feel Indian brands haven't been able to do so much there. There's just one application called Chingari at the moment, which I downloaded yesterday out of curiosity. It had so many bugs, I wanted to pull my hair out before even trying to log in. It's like this. Today, we're also at the time where a lot of people are saying this. Suddenly now, being a TikToker has also put a question on your patriotism, which is such a strange thing. Because until about a few days ago, these were apps that were legally available in the country. We are assuming privacy was not a concern because that's where they were allowed. Just like today we use iPhones and we use German cars and Japanese cars, nothing is a problem until something comes around. They say, hey, this is the problem from this country. But until such point, we never had that issue. We never had to worry about this. But what TikTok fundamentally got right was the fact that they made sure that their creators were always given more than they do. So today, I still count my TikTok loyalty higher than Instagram because TikTok made sure that they went out and got me brands and clients. No Indian company can pay me as much money that TikTok did. So I think
maybe they can. Malu's listening. Burgess, Malu's listening to you very closely. And not just to him, but that's great.
I can't
have bugs, and you're gonna have to pay.
Tamanna. So Paras, you should join ShareChat. You should try out the app. I can promise you there won't be as many bugs. But I can promise I also can promise you I can't pay you as much as TikTok did.
See, I need a new house in Bandra which has a sea facing view. So any app which is willing to help me get to that will be the app that I get on. But
okay.
I think
this is not about one person and one app. Wait, we don't want to do that over here. But I think it's important feedback. It's important feedback that yes, people are patriotic. We will not, use things or propagate ideas from a country which harms us, but then it has to be clear. Remember, as of now, the communication from the government is that these 59 apps have a problem with data privacy and other such bugs. There is nothing about the nationality of the countries from, of the country from where these apps come. There has to be
Tamanna, if I can step in here.
And the competition has to be as good. Yes, Burgess.
So I think, these concerns have not been raised about American platforms. These concerns have not been raised about platforms from other countries.
Because we care that Indian companies get all of these users.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. But I'm coming to a broader point, right? I agree that Indian platforms have, and this was rightfully said by another speaker on the call, Rehan said this, that we are still about maybe 2 years behind the Chinese and others because our tech revolution has come slightly later. But and so we will get there. But that the fact is that it's only apps from China that are being raised in this debate and discussed about privacy and security. It's not apps that are coming from America, etc. No one is concerned that the US government is spying on us, using Facebook or YouTube or whatever else we use from America.
It's the stuff of Vicky Power's nightmares of various governments, including this one, or anyone spying
I
on
think
any
Nikhil Pawar.
users.
I think Nikhil Pawar gets niceness from every government. So it's,
Yes,
Well,
that's
it's the
any
Indian government or
And
the
I
US government.
agree,
So
no user should be spied on by anyone. Gentlemen, I have
But
absolutely
but
run
one
out of
last
time.
point, Tamanna.
Okay,
One
last
last
but short
point,
one.
just in support of Paras, I don't think a citizen's patriotism should be judged by which app they use.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll end it there. And we'll be tracking the story very, very closely as it unfolds. I want to thank all of you for joining us on the show this evening.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We'll take a very short break at this point, but when we come back, the big voice of the day, Power Minister R.K. Singh talks to us about how we can move towards an Atmanirbhar Bharat.